I might have mentioned this in passing, but I am a massive heavy metal fan, in case you can't tell. And I strongly believe fantasy video games deserve more heavy metal. And whether you like it or not, I'm gonna tell you why. And some of you are going to tell me, Joe, what does heavy metal have to do with video games? Convenient that you ask, Mr. Strawman. What does these have to do with these? And what does these have to do with these? And what... Oh, I see it now. When I was 14 years old, when the dinosaurs, were roaming the earth, a friend of mine played for me the first metal album I ever heard, Peace of Mind by Iron Maiden. At the time, the books I was reading were The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and The Shadow of His Wings. Finally, I could listen to music that had themes that I, as a young 80s boy, could be interested in. I'm old. There are many theories on where the name heavy metal as a music genre came from. It seems like every day I check, there is a new theory. Each more modern and more nonsensical, since nobody can confirm, and every time the new theories seem more far-fetched. I'm going to stick to the one I learned when I was just a fledgling metalhead. Back in the 60s and 70s, the rock genre saw several bands emerge with a harsher sound. The first band to ever have the heavy metal sound, not the hard rock sound, I'm talking about the heavy metal sound, was a British band called Black Sabbath. At the time, the lineup consisted of Tommy Iommi, Geezer Butler, Bill Ward, and Ozzy Osbourne. Then a conveyor belt of singers came after Ozzy was kicked out, such as Ronnie James Dio, Ian Gillan, and Tony Martin. Their songs touched on subjects that were a bit edgy at the time: horror, fantasy, sci-fi, religion, mythology. Against way of Tommy Iommi, the use of fifth chords, which are the bread and butter of metal. Change this A clean chord into an A fifth chord, add distortion, and voila! Now you know how to turn any tune into metal. At the same time, the comic book industry in Europe had a magazine called Metal Hurlant. Published in France, it had talents such as Moebius, Jodorowsky, Richard Corbin. They had tackled narratives from the sci-fi genre as well as fantasy and horror. The lyrics matched very well with metal. I guess it is time to mention that the rest of the world got to know Metal Hurlant by a different name: heavy metal. Look at this cover. Look at the bird, the big-titted lady, the sword. It was exciting just to look at this artwork, just to imagine how much adventure would be inside the magazine. I was good friends with the artist too, Chris Achilleus. He was a great guy. We used to bitch a lot about the new productions of Conan, by the way. We loved doing that. And then the movie adaptation came out, with stories by Richard Corbin, among others. It was a kind of literature that over time evolved and also saw Enki Bilal's Nicopol trilogy turned into film on Immortel, or see a collaboration between Moebius and Jodorowsky to produce the first Dune before David Lynch also had a go at it. They even managed to convince Salvador Dali to play the Emperor. Never happened though. Really, check it out. Also, now we're going to have Christopher Walken. I have not read this anywhere, so take this with a pinch of salt. But I am convinced that Luc Besson paid tribute to Richard Corbin by calling the protagonist of The Fifth Element, the one played by Bruce Willis, Corbin Dallas. But I digress. There was an important point in my life, I would say around 2016, 2017, when I became a regular to a particular night in Camden Town in London. I'm talking about Metalworks. I fell in love with it because it was hankering back to the roots of metal. And not only made me appreciate and fall in love again with the fantasy and sci-fi behind the music, letting those paradigms populate my imagination, but also it made me a better musician. And it gave me a whole bunch of new lifelong friends. The night is still going on whenever it can, so if you have the chance, check it out. It's free. The thing is, I found myself inspired to run more D&D games and pick up new RPG titles for my computer. Getting back to Tamriel, Azeroth, Norath, Middle-earth, the Continent, Terratia. One thing I really miss is old-fashioned fantasy. For some reason, I find current fantasy and the art that goes with it unnecessarily elaborate and other work. It's almost like every artist out there is taking part in an unofficial dick-waving competition to make the most outlandish and complicated elements in fantasy. It is a fantasy so detached from us that I find it hard to immerse myself in it. From those days, we have two significant figures that contributed to that old-style fantasy in rock. These two, I love very much. Look at this dude. Look at him. I've always said that Ronnie was a personification on stage of whatever wizard or warrior he was talking about. He didn't only have one of the best, if not the best, voices in metal, but he was a real showman. And with Deep Purple came Ritchie Blackmore. He and Dio had Rainbow going on. Look at the artwork and tell me it is not the amalgamation of both rock and fantasy. I love tracks like Temple of the King. Then Ritchie also has Blackmore's Night with his wife, Candice Night. They are basically fantasy bards and minstrels. Look at this too. Look at this. It is also not uncommon for bands to borrow from fantasy literature to either make their songs or conceptual albums, like Hawkwind with their Chronicles of the Black Sword, based on Elric of Melniboné. They even took the author, Michael Moorcock, on tour to put him on stage reading passages from his work. Apparently he had a bit of stage fright. Blind Guardian, with numerous songs about the Tolkien's, Moorcock's and Stephen King's work, such as The Lord of the Rings, the Bard Songs in the Forest, the Bard Songs The Hobbit, The Quest of Tanelorn, Tommy Knockers, and some bands find their names in Tolkien's work directly, like Gorgoroth or Amon Amarth. Eternal Champion is a reference to Erek Kosef from Moorcock's work. We could go on. Every fourth band has some fantasy, horror, or sci-fi in there somewhere. Seriously, these genres are everywhere. There is an entire subgenre of metal. Epic metal, power metal, whatever you want to call it. And if you have nothing to do with your life, or have no life at all, you can spend hours splitting hairs and spend your evening discussing with people about what subgenre makes a thing or another. We have bands like Rhapsody, Iced Earth, Stratovarius, Dragon Force, Hammerfall, and how to forget Halloween and The Keeper of the Seven Keys, and Manowar, the beacon of masculinity that is this lot. Proper barbarians. No, now seriously, I actually really like Manowar. I used to try and farm Time Lost Drake during the Lich King expansion, and often I used to replace the Ares background music for Master of the Wind by Manowar, and it suits perfectly. And farming that Drake can take a very long time, because I don't know when it responds. I think it's every 4 days or something. I don't know now, but well. Now, let's say I'm in Camden Town, at the Death, my favorite watering hole in the world for drinkage and merriment. I'll go to the bar and say, "Hey CJ, can I have a pint of neck oil? I'll be back in a sec. I'm going to the toilet." And then CJ goes, Joe, don't take forever, mate." And while I'm in there, training the lizard, I look at the wall in front of me and it's all full of fantasy stickers. Look at that one and don't tell me it is not Games Workshop logo changed a little bit. And also look at that sick artwork. So what do we have currently? Most recently, we have Volca. Doom Eternal. Dusk. Proteus. This gentleman, Andrew Hulsholt, worked on the last 3 titles, and many more. And you can tell, the man is like King Midas. Everything he touches turns to gold. And he has been involved in so many projects lately, he touches a lot. Alright, never mind. Guitar Hero has given us a lot of tracks of metal, and by its very nature, metal tracks can be very challenging. Personally, I suck at Guitar Hero, but even if you have the real one and play Rocksmith instead, I also find it very difficult. You can start playing, and it's almost like the game realizes that you can play a bit, and ranks up the difficulty to John Petrucci's level from one stage to the next. So I don't play, that's why. Brutal Legend is basically all the homage to metal that we could wish for. Except that's not exactly the point I want to drive home with this video. The main character is voiced by Jack Black. Good casting there. Cyberpunk 2077 has both rock and chillwave versions of Never Fade Away, which by the way was a module on the official pen and paper TTRPG, not the current one though. CD Projekt Red has included several radio stations in their game with original rock and metal tunes. And if you want to go a little bit more meta, since we mentioned Amon Amarth before, they also released their own mobile game with chiptune versions of their songs. It portrays a cute Viking hero, kind of like a platformer, not bad. Iron Maiden released Legacy of the Beast, a turn-based game with all the incarnations of Eddie, the ever-popular mascot. So, what should we have more of? And imagine metal versions of the following. Just pay attention how these sound if you swap the soundtrack for metal version of this. Splatterhouse. Golden Axe. Decapattack. And the much beloved Guile's theme. It fits everything, don't you know? Get a fair share of heavy metal shooters and more modern age games, the more sci-fi, more cyberpunk ones, but I still believe fantasy RPGs can have more of it. I believe heavy metal deserves as much a cameo on fantasy RPGs as Stan Lee on the Marvel movies. You know, when they used to be good, of course. In a way, I'm relieved that the guy passed away before he could see what the executives of Disney turned his work into. I guess the purpose of this video is not necessarily to point my finger at a particular game and say, you can do with a bit more heavy metal. I suppose what I would like is to incentivize whoever sees this and not discard the possibility of adding a few metal chords in their fantasy game. Keep an open mind. You never know if this is going to give you the edge that your game needs to stick out against the rest. Give some work to the musicians featured in this video. Links to the channels are in the description. Hire them, put them to work. No matter what, I will always think epic fantasy and metal are a match made in heaven. Or hell. Thank you for watching. Oh, and subscribe. Subscribe.